Hello everyone. Last week we went ahead and looked at vermilion, and lots of them use quite a few different pigments in their vermilion. And PR255 I noticed was coming up as a pyrrole or a scarlet. Now, I don't know how the companies decide how to name their their pigments and so forth, because they use the same pigments across the board, and we're going to be taking a look at PR255 today and PR254. Most of them are called Pyrrole. Some of them are called Scarlet, and some of them have their very own names. So it's kind of confusing when you're looking to purchase a paint and there's so many names to the same pigments, and then the same pigments don't convey over to the actual, name to pigment thing. So it's a very confusing thing. So as we go through these colors, we're going to take one that seems to be kind of odd in its segment, and we're going to bring it down and take a look at those that I have in that number and what they call them, and then we're going to move on from there. And it looks like after this week we're going to be going into the Scarlets and Scarlet Lakes, because those names seem to be coming up, and there's a lot of pigments out there that companies like to call their paint Scarlet or Scarlet Lake by different numbers and different pigments. So let's go ahead and get started. As always, I'm using my Pyrrole Escoda number 8. It's just good for me to keep consistent, so that if a paint feels different or has a different consistency, I can go ahead and let you know that that one feels a little different or is a little harder to re-wet or anything like that. This is Coors PR255, and it is a potent one. And I hope this is helping you select pigments or colors based on either name or pigment information. It's a tough one out there. And of course, Core moves and grooves across the page. Next up is Zaro. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And they call theirs Scarlet. And it's a lot warmer than the Coors. It is quite a bit of a name confusion though. Oh, I'm using the same paper that I always use, the Saunders Waterford hot pressed paper. I know lots of you use cold press. I usually use hot press, and I'm trying to keep these swatches consistent so we can see if there is any discrepancies between the colors. And yes, that is definitely a lot warmer. Now we're going into the PR254s, and this is Michael Harding, and this one does call itself Pyrrole. Wow. Every time I use these paints, they are so creamy and so saturated. Now we have our Holbein, and this one's a lot orangier. I mean, do they name them according to how they think that they're processed? If they're a little warmer, a little cooler, and then that doesn't even go across the board because some of these look a lot warmer than the one next to it, named the same. Now, of course, all these paints are extremely high quality, and if I do run into one that doesn't re-wet or has a little funkiness to it, I will let you know. And we go into our M-gram. Really nice and rich and creamy. Looks very close to the Michael Harding one. And now we have Roman Schmal, and this one is still called Pyrrole. And it does feel a little bit warmer than a few of the others. Beautiful color. And now we like to go into the PR254s that like to be called a little something different. This one is called Saddle by My Mary Blue. It's amazing how they can paint on and look so different, even though they're all the same pigments. I'd say this range is a little closer than some ranges we've done. Some of them look way different. This is a pretty orangey one as well. Winsor & Newton Winsor Red. And I don't pre-wet the pans. They are all coming from a dried pan. Some of them were poured and some of them were purchased in half pan or full pan, like Roman Schmal. Oop, I got a little hair in there. Very nice deep red. And now we have A Gala Scarlet, they like to call it. And it's kind of funny because their vermilion is actually the PR255 from above, so we'll take a look at that and how they have two colors in this range that are also named the same names as some of the other ones. They have a PR255, that's the Venetian, and they have this 254, which they call their Scarlet, and they do look quite a bit different. Very beautiful color. We're taking a look at Schminke now, and they like to call theirs Scarlet Lake. You know, I have to say, I think I really like the coloring to a PR254. It just has something about it. It's very close to a true red, but leans just a tad warm. Sorry for the pan rattle. And our last up is Sennelier with Sennelier Red. None of these were hard to re-wet. None of them had any issues of me just dipping directly into the pan. There is some color variance according to how warm or cool they are. Perfect. We'll let all these dry up and come back in a second. All these beautiful colors are all dry, and so let's take a closer look. So they're all fairly close. As far as the PR255, it does tend to seem like those are just a hint warmer than the PR254s. The one that gave me the most runaround was, of course, Core, which is expected out of Core. I do push back a little bit of water into the bottom right hand corners and see how they react. Sennelier stays the smoothest and the most consistent throughout its swatch, whereas My Mary Blue faded the most after drying. It tends to get kind of this faded or flatter look to it, and that's just been my experience with the majority of their colors. They tend to get a little more muted, and some people seek that out. So if that's something you're seeking out, I'd say the deepest one is the Michael Harding, and then the M. Graham, with the truest red being Winsor and Newton. The Winsor red, I'd say that's pretty close to a really nice, truer color, or truer red, I'd say, right in the middle of red. It did have this funny little bit of thing, but that could have been user error of where when I pushed the water it got a little bit too much. You can see the Michael Hardings moved a little bit more than some of the others. Now there's user error here, but Winsor Red moved about, I'd say, medium if you take off those sides. And so like Michael Harding moved a little bit more. Core moved a ton more. The Azzurro is actually quite smooth like the Sennelier is. It's quite smooth, but it is a lot warmer, and I would say it's definitely closer to the vermilion side than it is to the scarlet or Pyrrole side. So what do you think about all the names that they use? Pyrrole, scarlet, vermilion, with all the pigments overlapped. Do you find that this is also confusing? I mean, you can always look at the pigment number, but then the colors, I mean, if you look at the 255s, one definitely goes towards this side and one definitely goes towards this side. Now, if we just look at the A Gallo colors, which started my whole confusion on these three colors right there, the PR255, which they call their vermilion, and if you look down here, which they call their scarlet at PR254, there is definitely a difference in those two colors. I mean, it's a pretty wide gap with how warm this one is. Both of them gorgeous colors, but this one is definitely a lot warmer, and this one's definitely closer to a true red. But then, you know, some of the other ones they call vermilion or a true vermilion, the PR106, you know, looks completely different. They're much oranger over in this range. Whereas you look at the same 255s here, and they call this a Pyrrole, but I think this looks more like a scarlet than the Azzurro, who calls themselves a scarlet. So yeah, I think it can be very confusing. Yes, you can look at a lot of these PR254s are very similar, and they would paint out in a painting extremely close unless you're looking for something that pushes more water or looks a little smoother or a little like I guess not really flatter color. There's the My Mary Blue doesn't necessarily look flatter. It just kind of loses a lot of its really brightness to it. So I hope you had a little fun looking at those colors, me causing more confusion in your life, or maybe simplifying it, and you can see which colors might work for you, or if you have one of these in your palette and you were like, ooh, I wonder if this brand was like a little bit different than that brand, you can see which one does what. If you like more of the movement in the core on this type of color, or you like the really smoothness of the Sennelier. Thank you for joining me again, and I think next time we'll be going into Scarlets and Scarlet Lakes, and we'll see how confusing those are to pick for our palette. So please put down in the comments which ones you pick for your choices. We did vermilion last week. We went into these two PR255 and PR254s, and we'll be seeing what colors come up in Scarlets and Scarlet Lakes next time. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.